Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is John Campea, and this is part 2 of our HBO's Justice League open spoiler discussion. Now, of course, we had part 1 of the open spoiler discussion back on Thursday, but we had more questions come in and comments and observations and thoughts than we had time to cover, and so we gathered those up, and we're going to get to all of the rest of them that came in here. Now, of course, Zack Snyder's Justice League is now out in the world for people to see. I think most people quite enjoyed it. I liked it more. I mean, just to sum up again, I liked it more than the theatrical version. I even liked it more than Batman versus Superman, which I quite enjoyed. I thought overall, just the extra time gave it a lot of more ability to have character depth, character development, which makes a world of difference. It also gave more time to give more context to the narrative that's going on, which again makes a world of difference. I did think it didn't need to be 4 hours long, though. I think at like 3 hours and 30 minutes, if Snyder had taken a scalpel, and there's at least a half hour of stuff that wasn't relative to the narrative they could have cut out. And I think this thing would have really sung. But still, even as it is at 4 hours, it's an improvement over the theatrical. I think it's even better than Batman vs. Superman. I mean, I don't think it's as good as Man of Steel, but you guys know what I think of Man of Steel. But there it is. But anyway, we spent 2 hours on Thursday taking your guys' thoughts about it. Now let's continue on and get to the rest of those questions that you guys sent in, shall we? And we're going to start getting caught up with Jake Rowan, who writes, okay, I was prepared to hate this movie, and I didn't. It's so much better. Anyway, the last 30 minutes of sequel baiting, could it happen? Well, this is a question that has come in a lot, and I'll just basically say what I've always said. Going strictly off of what Warner Brothers and Zack Snyder have said, no, I don't think we're going to get anything else. Because you go by Warner Brothers, they said this is a one-time thing. It is a cul-de-sac. They said it's a dead end. This is just a one-time special thing. Zack Snyder, when asked if he would do more, he said, I have no plans to do any more. So just going off what they said, don't get mad at me. This is what they said. I'm going to say no, I don't think they will. And I think it's become pretty obvious that Walter Hamada and Warner Brothers have started taking things in a new direction. So if Zack Snyder or Warner Brothers starts changing what they said, then we can revisit the question. But for now, both of them are saying no. So I think that's all we have to go on. Anyway, next up, NPE94 writes, is there a 4-hour Campea cut of your movie trailer documentary that we can campaign for? Unfortunately, no. Like, it ended up being just around an hour and a half. I think my documentary ended up being right around an hour and a half. My original cut wasn't too much longer. It was just under 2 hours. So I sliced out about a half hour of it just to give it better pace. So, no, I won't be re-editing that. I've moved past that movie now. I spent a year working on it, and I'm very happy with the results. So anyway, there's that. But thank you for that, NPE. Next up, Drake Ripley writes, hey, John, longtime viewer, first time tipping. Thank you so much, Drake, for being around for so long. I must say that I absolutely love this movie. It was everything I wanted. Already one of my favorite DC movies, along with the Ultimate Edition of Batman vs. Superman. Yeah, I liked it more than Batman vs. Superman. Now, it still doesn't come close to me to Snyder's other film, Man of Steel, which I think is one of the best comic book movies ever made. But yeah, it was better than I thought it would be. Like, I'm one of the people that I said leading into it, I think people who already know that they appreciate Zack Snyder's kind of take on DC characters will like it. I think probably that people that already know like Zack Snyder's take on DC characters and don't like his take on it probably won't. I'm one of the people that I've been a fan of all the stuff that he's made in the DC universe so far, particularly Man of Steel. So I wasn't surprised that I liked it. I was surprised that I liked it more than Batman versus Superman, though. That I was surprised about. So pleasantly surprised. All right, next up. Aaron writes, hey, John. In the beginning of Man of Steel, when Superman is born, he cries out and the creatures of Krypton heard him. Foreshadowing the cry out in Justice League? I don't think so. Because remember, on Krypton, there's nothing particularly special about him other than he's the first naturally born child in like generations. So I think, yeah, I mean, Zack Snyder's the only one who can really answer that question. So my guess is, and it's only a guess, my guess is that there's no connection. But let me just say, I thought that opening with Superman dying at the hands of Doomsday and his yell sending out these the repercussive sound waves across the world, and his cries being the thing that awakens the mother box. I thought that gave a really good kickstart to the narrative, so I really particularly like that scene. All right, next up. Joe Fayant writes, better than 2017, but not by much. 5 out of 10. I like, for instance, I like the theatrical version more than most people do, although I think this version was better. I don't think it was... here's the thing. I don't think, personally, that how much better this is than the theatrical version is that significant, but I believe it's more significant than not by much. So I don't know where, if it's only 1 point of difference or 8 points of difference. I think it's like 4 points of difference, but whatever, be that as it may. But yeah, I thought both were better than a 5 out of 10. But then again, I don't do numerical scores on things, so that's just me. But hey, at least you gave it a shot, and at least you liked it a little bit more than the original version. All right, Ben Rayner writes, I prefer the music in the theatrical cut more. I love the nods to Superman 78. Yeah, I did too. And Batman 89 in that score, but that's just me. I think I agree with what you're saying. And I question some of the soundtrack, not score, but some of the soundtrack decisions, like some of the song choices they used in the Snyder Cut, I thought were questionable. But as far as the overall score, I like the overall score in the theatrical version. I actually even thought I thought the score in this version was actually better. I thought the score in this, and I already liked it, but I thought the one in this one was better. I thought it played to the scenes a little bit better. So I don't know, that's me. But hey, man, thanks for sharing your opinion on it. All right, next up is Joe Fayant, who writes, favorite moment for me, Batman and Joker. I thought Batman saying the F-bomb wouldn't work, but Snyder proved me wrong. It worked for me and was badass. I mean, I like the scene. Although I do question whether the scene was necessary for the movie. But, I mean, it not as badly as some other scenes. Anyway, overall, I liked watching the scene. And because, I really do like Jared Leto's Joker more than most people do. So I really liked it. As far as Batman dropping an F-bomb, it just doesn't do anything for me. Either the line works or it doesn't. Like, if it's a good scene, it's a good scene. Batman saying fuck doesn't make the scene any better or any worse for me. I didn't think it had a little bit of shock value just because you didn't expect to hear him say it. But he said it, and sorry. And that goes to the other thing. If this thing was released, I don't think it would have gotten an R rating. There was nothing in this movie that was R rated. I mean, I've seen PG-13 films that got away with more. So I don't know why they're saying this thing's rated R, but whatever. I did like the scene, but yeah, him swearing. And you know me, I swear a lot. So it's not like I'm against swearing. But I mean, it just didn't do anything to improve the scene. I already liked it. It just didn't do anything to improve the scene for me. But that's just me. All right, next up. Telephone Productions writes, hey, John. Am a person that has not enjoyed any of Zack's DCU previous installments, but I did enjoy this one very much. Do you think we may get a sequel, since even people like me enjoyed this one? No. And again, we've already went over, what Zack said, what HBO said. Until we hear one of them say something differently, I don't think there's any reason to think they would do another one. And not to mention, the other thing we got to keep in mind is this. Warner Brothers already knows what kind of box office results they get from Zack Snyder DC movies, and they're not great. And now I say that as the world's largest defender of Man of Steel. I think it's the most underrated comic book film of all time. I think it's one of the best comic book films of all time. I do not understand why so many people dislike it, but they do. But no, I don't. Again, once Zack starts saying things that are different and Warner Brothers starts saying things that are different, it's something we can consider. But as of right now, from what both of them are saying, this was a dead end. This was a cul-de-sac. No plans to do anymore. So, yeah, I'll probably just... And not to mention, Walter Hamada's got other plans to take the DCEU in different directions. So, again, that may change if the parties involved start saying different things. But as of right now, what we have is them saying no. And so that's all we have to go on. So we'll see. All right, next up. Jared McBride writes, I enjoyed the movie. I want a sequel. And what did you think of Martian Manhunter? I know he just had a small part. I thought it was a complete waste of time. I'm not going to lie to you. The Martian Manhunter scenes did nothing for the movie. They didn't do anything for the narrative. I mean, that entire scene he had with the only thing narratively that came out of the scene with Amy Adams was we learned that Amy Adams hadn't been back to work yet. That doesn't really do anything for the narrative. And then the whole thing of him showing up at the end, I thought was very odd. Because it's like, hi, I'm this incredibly powerful being. Yeah, I decided not to help out when Doomsday was threatening everything and Superman died. And when these aliens invaded with all the parademons and they're trying to wipe out the Earth, I decided not to help out. Very busy, had to do my nails. Very, very busy. I was I was tracking my crypto on Robinhood. I was very, very busy. But just so you know, now that the fight's over, I'm here to help if you need me. I thought that was just a very, very weird thing. And one of the things that easily could have been cut out of this 4-hour movie to make it a little bit shorter and to make it move at a better pace. But yeah, and listen, I'm not saying that they shouldn't have Martian Manhunter. I'm just saying, maybe that's something for another movie, because I just didn't feel like in a movie that was 4 hours long, that scenes like that didn't do anything to move the narrative forward probably weren't necessary. So that's just kind of my take on it. Anyway. Next up, Aaron writes, Justice League 4-hour movie or 4-part show would have a better delivery for audiences. Listen, I think Warner Brothers or HBO Max would have benefited much more from a 4-part series. I think they would have benefited much more, because guess what? It's over now. They had one launch. And that's it. It's done. If they had put it out, now listen, I get it. I'm a binger too. I prefer to sit down and watch everything in one chunk. But if they had put it out, they could have enjoyed the WandaVision effect or the Mandalorian effect. If they put out one episode, and if people really liked it and buzzed about it and talked about it, then more people would be back to watch episode 2. And if that was good and people enjoyed it and people liked it, the momentum builds. And then they get to do it again the following week, and then again the following week. I think it would have been much better for them to do it that way. But the point is moot. They decided to put it out as one 4-hour movie, which is the way it was originally intended to supposed to be viewed anyway. So it's not like it's a bad thing they did at that. But if you're asking me, do I think they would have benefited more from the 4-hour release or from a 4-part series? I think it's clear they would have benefited more from a 4-part release, because then they could be building up and hyping up for the next part coming out, and then repeated that a couple of times. But I mean, they did it this way, and it is the way it was originally meant to be seen, as one 4-hour movie. So they went with that way, and there's nothing wrong with that. All right. Next up, Richard writes, I also agree that it was too long. Your thoughts, John. I couldn't agree more. They could lose 30 minutes easy and it would still be great. I completely agree. Like I already, as it is at 4 hours, I thought it was really good. Like I said, even better than Batman versus Superman, which I enjoyed quite a bit. But I think it would have gone to another level had it had crisper, tighter pacing. And that could have been done by taking out several very unnecessary scenes. I've gone back to this before, but that entire Flash sequence where he's going for the job interview and then he sees Iris, and very creepily, she's a stranger. She's never met him. He sits there, instead of just going about the business saving her, sits there and decides to stroke and caress her face. Very creepy. But that whole scene did nothing to move the narrative of the story further. That was a scene that maybe could have been in a different movie, like maybe in Flash's movie, but it just didn't need to be there. And there were several moments throughout the movie that were like that. It's like, there's nothing wrong with the scene, but the scene doesn't actually move the narrative forward, nor does it do anything to really deepen our understanding of any of the characters. Like, we see Ezra Miller going to apply for a dog walking job. Okay, but that didn't deepen our understanding of him, right? That didn't deepen the understanding. It didn't tell us something we didn't already know from previous conversations that we had. They could have cut that out. And I'm just saying that if this movie, with all of the added benefits of having that extra time, took a good surgical scalpel and cut out some of the bloat and got it down to like 325, 330, 335, on top of all the other improvements in the movie, it would have just sung. It would have sang. with a really good pacing clip to go along with all the other benefits, I think it would have stood to benefit. I think it would have made it even better. Others will disagree with me, and that's totally cool. We all have a different point of view on it, but that's my particular view on that. All right, next up. We got Angela Dashner, who writes, tips in like $50. Thank you, Angela. Appreciate that so much. Love this movie? Question mark. Like it better than the theatrical version. Characters were so much better. Ending dream sequence was quite confusing. What did you think? Well, I will say I didn't love this movie, but I really did quite enjoy it. I really, really did quite enjoy it. Like I said, I even liked it more than Aquaman, and you guys know I really enjoyed Aquaman. I liked it more than Aquaman. I also agree that it was better than the theatrical version. Again, my whole thing with the theatrical version was this. I still have no idea what the idea... Now that I've seen Zack Snyder's cut, I am left wondering what was the purpose of the theatrical version they did. They didn't change the movie at all. Like, all they did was made it half as long and made it worse. It's still the exact same story. It's the same movie, just they cut it in half and made it worse. And so I was saying, and you know what, here's the thing. The theatrical version shouldn't even be called the Joss Whedon version, because none of that was his movie. He clearly just stepped in. Warner Brothers just gave him a directive, step in there, cut it in half, add some more jokes, but basically it's still the same thing. So when I said this before, I said, the thing is, it's essentially the same movie. Some people interpreted me as saying Zack Snyder just made a movie that was just like the theatrical. No. It's the opposite, which has left me bewildered at what Warner Brothers was doing. Because all they did was they went ahead and made the same movie that Zack already handed to them, except they cut it in half, gave it no room to breathe, and made it worse. And I just don't understand it. Look, if all they wanted to do was to get the 2-hour runtime, then all they should have done is just got an editor. And it still would have been worse, because you would have lost all that character breathing room. It still would have been worse. I just don't understand. Like, I was led to believe that, they brought in Joss Whedon to kind of change the story a bit, but they didn't. It's the exact same thing. All they did was they carbon copied what Zack Snyder had already handed them, and then inexplicably cut it in half. I mean, I get you don't want it to be 4 hours. I get that, because you can't put out a 4-hour movie theatrically, it'll bomb. I get that. But why couldn't it have been longer than 2 hours? Why couldn't it have been longer than 2? And if all you were going to do is basically keep the exact same skeleton of the movie that Zack had already given you, then for heaven's sake, just get an editor and cut it down to 2.5 hours. It left me a bit bewildered. So anyway, yes, I did think it was better than the theatrical version. I don't think there ever really, after seeing Zack's version, I realized there really is no such thing as Joss Whedon's version. It's just the Warner Brothers mandated cut this movie in half version, which again, I'm a little bit thinking. I go back and forth regarding, the future scene in the apocalyptic world. I go back and forth. My first thought was, all this stuff is cool, like, because, you got Mara there, you got Deathstroke there, you got Joker there, and Bruce there, and like, my first thought the first time I saw it was, this doesn't need to be here. Like, this scene doesn't need to be in the movie. But then I swing the other way and went, well, no, it gives us it gives us another look into what it was they're trying to stop and what may still come, because that's the way it was originally thinking. So I kind of go back and forth on it a little bit. But again, bottom line is, I don't think I loved this movie, but I did quite enjoy it. Like I said, I like it more than Aquaman, Batman vs. Superman. But yes, I do think, in a substantive way, I think this is better than the theatrical version. I do. So I agree with you on that, Angela. Anyway, thank you again for sending that in. I appreciate that. Next up, we got Magic K, who writes, Theatrical cut Superman, save people, lead the team, punch bad guys. Snyder cut Superman, killed civilians, remember those soldiers, and punched bad guy. Okay, maybe it's just me. I do not recall Superman killing soldiers. Hold on a second. I don't recall Superman killing soldiers. Are you talking about when he wakes up scene? Did he actually kill some soldiers there? I'm not so sure about that. And of course, he kills again in this one right now. He himself did not cut off Steppenwolf's head, but he did do the setup. He threw up, Steppenwolf so Wonder Woman could cut his head off. So he participated in murder again. And again, theatrically, I have no problem with that. I have no problem with that. You're talking about a world conqueror who's trying to wipe out life on Earth. You cut that guy's head off because he's just going to keep coming back. So I have no problem with it, but I'm just waiting for those people who are saying Superman never should have killed Zod. I'm just waiting for them to come back. He shouldn't have allowed, Steppenwolf to have his head cut off. But I'm personally cool with it. Me, myself, I am personally cool with it. All right. Anyway, but again, I'll have to go back and look. I don't remember him killing soldiers, but I'll have to go take a look. All right. Next up. Sajid writes, "Hey, John, long-time watcher, first-time writing in. Thank you for writing in, man. I love the shot from Batman vs. Superman when Superman screamed and caused shockwaves that reached everyone. And again, I thought that was a really good way to start off this movie. Now, I really do enjoy the way the theatrical cut starts with kind of going through a musical montage, seeing how the world is now in a world without Superman. I did like that a lot. But from a narrative, again, I keep coming back to narrative. From a narrative point of view, I think I prefer the way they did it here. I go back and forth on it a little bit. Right now, I'm kind of in the mindset that I prefer the way they did it here. All right. Telephone Productions writes, "Darkseid is such a great guy. He even had a funeral for Wonder Woman after he presumably killed her. LOL, didn't think I would see that in Snyder's Cut. Stay filthy." Yeah, that was interesting. When she was getting the classic kind of Greek burial sort of thing, I thought, well, that was nice. They're letting them have a burial for him, but I don't know. I just thought it was cool. I don't know if they're trying to suggest that there's honor with Darkseid, or if that was them saying Darkseid is rubbing it into the Amazonians that he killed her, or I don't know, but I just thought it looked cool. I just thought it looked pretty fun. All right, Jay Meister writes, "Was surprised in how many different ways this cut fixed Rue original," probably meant the original. "Cyborg was much more relevant, and the third act was much better." I didn't think the third act was much better, but I did think it was better. I did think it was an improvement. Taking out, or at least not having that family, like, I get it. I get it. When they were doing the theatrical cut, they probably felt like we need a face of what's at stake, right? Because in Snyder's version, there's no humanity, right? We don't get a face of it's just this theoretical, they're going to destroy the world. It's just a theoretical. So I understand that when they were putting the theatrical cut together, they wanted a group of people to be the representation of humanity. And we are constantly reminded, who is it and what is it the Justice League is fighting for? And that family in Russia became that avatar for us. I understand that. But it wasn't executed right. And instead of them becoming a good avatar for us, understanding, being a visual representation of what it was they were fighting for, which I think is a good idea, it just never felt like it tied in. Like, how are the parademons not getting them? Just because they're hiding under the bed in their house? I mean, it just didn't work. It just didn't work. So again, in principle, I understand why they put that family in. But they needed to do it in a much better way for it to be effective for what it was they were trying to make it do. So when you come into this version and they just took it out, it just was a cleaner, better feeling ending. So yeah, I'm with you on that part. I didn't think it was much better, but I did think it worked that way. And as far as the Cyborg thing goes, I've said this all along, just the addition of that scene with Cyborg and the waitress, that to me, in one scene, represents what it is that makes the Snyder Cut better than the theatrical version. That one scene represents philosophically what elevates to me the Snyder Cut above the theatrical version, because it just gave so much more character depth and our understanding of the character of Cyborg. Again, I said this before, but I'll say it again. Without that scene, Victor comes across as a mopey, feeling sorry for himself, emo, annoying loser. No, me. He's always just miserable, moping around, right? You add that scene about him and the waitress, it completely and fundamentally alters the way we perceive Victor, because it shows us his heart. And now, when we look at all the other scenes, that without the scene with the waitress, Victor just looks like this, oh, poor me. Now that we've seen his heart and we know his character more, when we see those other scenes, instead of seeing a mopey dude, whatever, which is how he came across before, now we see a good man in pain. And you cannot downplay how vital and how important that is to being able to connect with the audience when you do that. And that's why, for me, and there are several moments like that throughout the movie, but if you just had to say, John, what's the one moment in this movie that kind of represents why you say the Snyder Cut is better than theatrical, it's Victor with the waitress. That symbolizes, represents, and kind of sums up all the ways in which this elevates the material much higher than the theatrical version. And that whole Victor scene was definitely the thing that did it for me. All right. Next up, we've got Kat Harlem, who writes, I love the additional scenes of Cyborg and his father, Lab, again, giving us more insight into his humanity, and the Amazon woman fight scene. I didn't need scene of Barry saving the woman. I completely agree with you on that. Or the woman singing and smelling Aquaman shirt. I forgot about that. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, that was also another one of the scenes that easily could have been and should have been cut out of the movie. But, they wanted to kind of symbolize that they look at, Aquaman almost in a religious way. Whatever. It just, I'm like, and don't get me wrong, the women there had a tremendous voice. It sounded beautiful. Not like the screeching I'm doing right now, but it was useless to the movie. It did nothing to move the movie forward. It did nothing to expand our understanding of the important parts of the narrative or anything like that. It should have been cut out. That scene, the Barry scene, and there are some others. Like I said, I think you could have got this thing down. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying get this thing back down to 2 hours. No. But I think you got this to like 3 hours and 30, and it just would have, boom, it just would have sung. I just thought it would have elevated all the good stuff that was in there even more. But yeah, that Aquaman scene was one that I also agree. I thought was very, very strange. I thought it's just, why is this here? Anyway, Kyle writes, how did Darkseid not know Earth has anti-life once they knew the boxes were there? The planet the boxes were lost was the same place. Darkseid tried to summon anti-life before lose. Hey, listen, I had the exact same thought. Like, maybe instead of giving us a scene of, instead of maybe giving us that, give us a short little Darkseid flashback as to why on earth, no pun intended, he wouldn't have already known that's where the anti-life matter thing is. Like, oh, that's the only time I've ever been defeated. That time I nearly died. That time that we lost the mother boxes and had to retreat from the world. Oh, it's that planet? I never, who knew? Who knew? What was that? That was very strange. I agree with you. That was very, very strange. So instead of us watching Flash really creepily caress a strange woman's face instead of just saving her, instead of having the songstresses of the sea, like giving Aquaman walkout music and smelling, like really creepily smelling his sweater, maybe give us a little scene that maybe gives us some sort of thought as to how on earth did Darkseid not know that? I mean, Steppenwolf knew the mother boxes were there. Wouldn't they have come back from mother boxes ages ago? I mean, I don't know, but that is one of the other things. Yes, that is one of the other things. All right, next up. Where are we at? Benny95 writes, best part of the film was Superman getting the black suit with his two fathers' dialogue in the background. Absolute chills and great callback to Man of Steel. It was a great moment. I still understand why he had to wear a black suit, though. Like, again, instead of creepy face caressing and Songbirds of the Sea scenes, maybe a short 30-second thing that explains why he needs to grab the black suit. Now, I've heard some people say, well, he needed the black suit because it helps him absorb the sun's radiation better. If that's the case, why doesn't he always wear the black suit? You know what? I'm Superman. I can afford to be weaker today. I'm going for the fashion choice of blue and red. If the reason he wore the black is because, well, in the black suit, he can absorb more of the sun's radiation, then the question becomes, well, why doesn't he wear that suit all the time? I mean, he gets his power from the yellow sun. Why wouldn't he wear that all the time if that suit actually has a fundamental impact on how powerful he is? I don't know. It's just kind of weird. All right. Joe writes, not a fan at all of Supes, but I love Man of Steel. So when they do the callback to with Jor-El and Pa Kent's dialogue and the black suit and the rocks go around him and he talks and he takes flight chills. I will say this. I didn't think we needed the whole repeat of the first flight scene, like the rocks going around his fist, but that whole montage of him hearing the voices of his two fathers, right? Of Jor-El and Jonathan Kent. That was really well done. I really like that part. We didn't need to see the rock spinning in to me, but that whole thing about the two voices of the dads, that was a really good touch. That was a really good touch because it spoke to who he is. It speaks to the character of Superman. And I thought that was great, Joe. I really thought that was great. All right. Next up, Don Miller writes, you can really tell that the length of a majority of Zack's movies are heavily influenced by old 4 or 5 hour long epics from the 40s and 50s. I don't know if it's that or he just doesn't know how to properly edit his own films down. I had the same criticism of Peter Jackson. Now, look, you know I love Peter Jackson. I do. But I remember when he made King Kong. And King Kong clocked in at 3 hours. That movie didn't need to be 3 hours. It did not need to be 3 hours. And I started wondering, does Peter Jackson know how to cut his own stuff out? Because at some point, it just comes to making it long for the sake of making it long. And, you know, Mel Gibson said something once. I remember in the director's commentary of Braveheart. Well, I think a top 20 greatest films of all time. I really do. I think Braveheart's in the top 20. But in the director's commentary of Braveheart on the DVD, he talks a bit about cutting a lot of scenes out of the movie. And he uses the example. He says, you know, cutting a scene out of a movie is like killing your own children. He said, because these scenes are scenes you've worked on for probably 2 years. You know, as you're planning the movie, you're going over the drafts and you're storyboarding it out and you plan it meticulously. And then you book a location to shoot it. You bring all these actors together. You're on set. You're shooting it for however many days or weeks. And then you put some post-production and blah, blah. You've worked on it for so long. And then you're sitting in the edit bay and you're just like, it's got to go. That scene we worked on so hard, so long, and we planned for it to be in there, but the movie moves better if we move it out, and the movie fundamentally doesn't need that scene to be there. It has to be cut out. And he said it's like killing your own children, but you have to do it. And sometimes I think like really strong directors like Peter Jackson, like Zack Snyder, whatever, sometimes forget that, yeah, I know you love that scene, but at the end of the day, the pacing of the movie will be served better if you took it out, because at the end of the day, the movie didn't need to have that scene. And it's not just about putting in more for the sake of putting in more. Now, I say that, but the fact of the matter is, the thing that makes the Snyder Cut better than the theatrical cut was extra time. Because that time was immediately translated into more character depth, more character development, better context for the narrative, all that kind of stuff. I mean, so it benefited from more time, but I just think at some point he also needed to take a scalpel to it. But that's, again, that's just me. All right, next up, Terrell Wise writes, do you prefer black suit or red blue suit? I'm a traditionalist. I really do prefer the red and blue. I mean, there have been 100 different versions of the red and blue suit, but just in general, I prefer the red and blue suit. Caleb Crane writes, actually funnier and lighter than I expected. Me too. Actually, when I first saw it, and I put out some tweets about it when I first saw the movie, one of the very first things I mentioned, besides the fact that I thought it was better than the theatrical version, was it's got lighter moments and has more humor in it than I thought, and they worked for me. I know they don't work for everybody, but though I actually liked it so much so I thought actually Zach could have put a little bit more in. I thought it really worked. I mean, don't overdo it, but I thought what he put in there really worked. All right, Michael Hamilton writes, I want more Martian Manhunter, and do you think we will get Ben Affleck's Batman film after that cliffhanger? No. Again, going back to everything that we've already said about what Warner Brothers has said, just going off that stuff, again, don't be mad at me. They're the ones that said it. If they change what they say, we can revisit this question, but the answer is probably no. And you know, all I've wanted for years is a Ben Affleck written, directed, starring in Batman movie. That's what I want. I'm very much looking forward to Matt Reeves' movie. Don't get me wrong. I'm very, very looking forward to that movie. But in the perfect world, we would be getting a Ben Affleck Batman movie. That's what I want, but no, I don't think we're getting it. Who knows, though? We'll see what happens. Nabil writes, I feel like this version of Superman, with his demeanor and the way he carried himself, was the one who would have eaten lunch with Freddy in Shazam. I like that. I love that ending, by the way, of Shazam. Well, first of all, you guys know I love that Shazam movie. It's my second favorite DCEU movie, that Shazam movie. I love it. And I love Superman's appearance at the end. Even though we never got to see Henry's face, that's fine. But we knew it was Superman. And I thought that was a terrific ending. And yes, but you know what? I feel like the one in the theatrical version would have as well. I feel like Superman in the theatrical version definitely would have as well. But yeah, I do. I like that comparison. I do. All right, next up, we get Entertain Nerd Studios writes, I'm with you, John. Man of Steel is a masterpiece. And when he showed up first picking up his dad's black suit, and you can hear Jor-El and Pa Kent voice, chills. The theme, John, the theme. I mean, the theme music it goes all the way back to Man of Steel. The theme music, if you ever would have said to me a number of years ago before Man of Steel that we would get a new theme that rivals, maybe not doesn't surpass, but rivals the iconic John Williams bum 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 theme, I would have said, everybody would have said you're crazy. But What Are You Going to Do When You're Not Saving the World by Hans Zimmer is a theme that I would suggest rivals the great John Williams Superman score. And every time I hear that music, I get absolute chills. And that was no exception. All right, next up. Purple Haze 4564 writes, was wondering now that the Snyder Cut is out, do you believe possibly that Warner Brothers will give Snyder another go at the Justice League? No. Also, what would you think if they possibly rescored? If they possibly, I don't know what you're trying to say there, the animated Justice League score, or recorded. Oh, you probably meant recorded. If they possibly recorded the animated Justice League score for the movie. I'm not a fan of Marvel or DC animated stuff. I think it would have been really cheesy if they'd gone with animated stuff, music, and try to bring it in. So, but then again, most people probably wouldn't have even noticed, so that's fine. But yeah, at the end of the day, like we said before, going off of what Zack Snyder and Warner Brothers has just said, no, I don't think they're going to move forward with that at all. And because they already know what they get. They already know what they get. What with box office wise, audience response wise, they know what they get with these movies. So, and Zack Snyder's moved on. We've got this great looking new zombie movie of him, Army of the Dead, coming out on Netflix here pretty soon that I'm pretty excited to see. So it's time for Zack to move on. It's time for Warner Brothers to move on. If they change what they're saying, we can revisit it. But for now, I think we just got to take them at their words and what they're saying. All right. Scott Brooks writes, This movie felt like an event for me. It could have been released as part 1 and part 2 and used as a perfect jumping off point for DC to compete with the MCU. Look, all I'll say is this. For years, we have constantly heard of, this is the thing that's going to make DC compete with Marvel, and this is the thing that's going to make DC compete with Marvel. DC can't compete with Marvel. The DCEU right now cannot compete with the MCU. Now, we're just talking about the movie stuff. Can they at some point? Yes. Could we flash forward 5 years from now and one is bigger than the other? Sure. But you've got, one that has put out more billion-dollar films. I've lost track of how many billion-dollar films they've put out and how many huge mega hits. And they've got a film as the #1 movie of all time. It just lost that spot to Avatar, but it'll get it back again. All that kind of stuff. Listen, here's the thing. As much as I love Man of Steel, the reality is it underperformed. Half the critics hated it. Half the audience hated it. I can never talk about Man of Steel without getting bombarded by messages from people. Man of Steel sucks. Whatever. It's all subjective. But to think that now magically Zack Snyder produced DCU stuff will now magically start competing with the MCU stuff, that's naive. I mean, that's just not going to happen. The definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again, but expect different results. I think Warner Brothers realize that and knows they need to go in some kind of a different direction. They need to change the plan. They can't just keep doing what they were doing. They need to change things up. And they did start changing things up, and they've been enjoying some success. They've got $2 billion films now in Joker and James Wan's Aquaman. They've got Academy Award wins with Joker. They made a terrific Shazam movie. Wonder Woman 84, that one didn't work so well. But no, this wouldn't have been a jumping off point to start because, again, if you had tried to release, and I still stand by this, if you had tried to release this movie theatrically, it would have tanked. Because there's a lot of the average movie-going audience that when you propose a movie that's like 3 hours and 10 minutes long, they're not going to go. You try to get a lot of the average film goers to go to a movie that's 4 hours long, it would have been nigh impossible. So, I mean, I don't know. But then again, it's all theoretical. We don't know what the answer is. I'm just speculating. You're speculating. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but who knows? All right, next up. We go to Don Miller writes, I'd have to disagree with you on the design for Steppenwolf, since that was the original design for him to begin with from Batman vs. Superman. However, I really preferred his voice from the theatrical cut than the guttural version in this. Again, I still stand by that. I think the design of Steppenwolf was better in the theatrical cut, but the CGI and the execution was much better in the Zack Snyder cut. I think if you could have merged the two, had the much better CGI and execution with the design of what he was. I didn't like spiky armor, Steppenwolf, whatever. I mean, I like the character. I just didn't like the design. I think I might agree with you about the voice too. It does get a little more guttural, and then Darkseid's as well. It's like that. I don't know why they went with that way. But to me, it's not a big deal though. Really not a big deal. Even the design of the character is not a big deal. I mean, I'm not a big fan of spiky Steppenwolf, but I don't really care about the design of the costume. He was better executed CGI. They fleshed out the character a little bit more. It didn't make that much of an improvement, though. I thought the addition of Darkseid made a significant improvement. Now, you might say, but John, Darkseid had like 1 minute and 38 seconds of screen time or whatever it was. I know, but just him having a physical presence in the movie gave a whole new dimension to the story. And I thought that was a significant, much bigger difference than Steppenwolf. They added that one little story hook. Oh, he's trying to make good in Darkseid's eyes. Okay, I mean, it didn't really change anything for me for that. But adding Darkseid completely changed the texture of the movie to me. Even if he wasn't in it that much, I thought it was a big, big step forward just having him there. and popping up even just a couple of times, I thought it made a huge difference. At least much bigger of a difference to me than the Steppenwolf thing did. Anyway, next up, Caleb Crane writes, thank God none of that Whedon-level cringe, jokey, awkward dialogue was there. Terrio had great humor without any of the silliness. Well, I don't know. This one had some silliness too. But I appreciate that. I think sometimes a little dash of silliness here and there really works. It really works. And it did work for me in the theatrical version as well. But Snyder had some of his own in here too, and it also worked for me. Much, much more than I thought they were going to have. And I thought it really worked. So anyway, that's just me, Caleb. All right, next up. Vin Smoke writes, let's not talk BS. I am not a big DCU fan, but the Snyder Cut was effing amazing. And that tease of a possible Injustice Gods Among Us sequel that we'll never see gave me goosebumps. Yeah, and again, the story of Injustice Gods Among Us is, in comic terms, some of the best writing I've read in comics in a long time. Because, I mean, I know most of you guys know that there's the games, Injustice Gods Among Us 1 and 2, but they actually did a comic series based on the games. And it is some of the best writing I've read in comic books in a long, long time. And for them to incorporate some themes, I mean, clearly, they were not doing an Injustice Gods Among Us direct translation, but they were borrowing some themes from that were very exciting. As somebody who's a big fan of that story, it was very exciting to see those themes being kind of touched on in there as well. All right, Caleb writes, Snyder is great at making stuff look awesome. Oh, no doubt. You may be a fan of Snyder, you may not. You cannot deny he is great visually. Like even the one movie he ever made that I didn't like, which is Sucker Punch. I'm not a fan of that movie. It's the only one he's ever made I'm not a fan of. But even that movie, it's visually gorgeous. He has got an absolute flair to how to make stuff just look very visually engaging. And Sucker Punch, I may not have liked the movie, but man, it was gorgeous. It was absolutely gorgeous to look at. All right, next up. Jack Master Nord writes, I must admit I really don't remember much about the theatrical release, but I'll say that I truly love this version and I found it less confusing. It's so funny because somebody wrote in a little bit earlier that they found it a little bit more confusing, but that's the subjective nature of it. Listen, one of the additional benefits, because we talked about giving more context to the narrative, giving more depth to the characters. One of the extra bits of having a longer runtime is because you're able to explain things a little bit more, it can take away any potential confusion in the story if you do it the right way. And I think there was a little bit of that in there. So I totally see where you're coming from there, Jackmaster. All right, next up. Karthik Narasimhan, I hope I'm getting that name right, who tipped like $20. Thank you, Karthik. I appreciate that, man. Writes, why are WB executives calling the Snyder Cut a creative cul-de-sac? Is it because of the deaths of Harley Quinn, Aquaman, and Lois Lane, as told in the epilogue dream sequence? No, they literally called it a cul-de-sac because it means dead end. It means that they're not taking this any further. Like this is it. They had already moved on from the Zack Snyder iteration of the DCEU. But they just did this because they thought it could get a lot of attention for HBO Max. And they were right. It's getting a lot of attention for HBO Max. Deservedly so. But I think they wanted to make sure to check expectations well in advance. To say, hey, just so you know, we're going to do this on HBO Max, but it is a cul-de-sac. It's not going to go anywhere. You're going to get what Zack originally was going to do with that movie, and it's done. And then Zack said he has no plans to do any more. So they're calling it that simply because it is a reflection of what at least they're communicating is the reality. They never had any plans to allow this thing to go any further. They said right away to check our expectations. This is it. They're going to do this. Now, they may change their tune. But for now, they're both kind of sticking to that song. And so I think that's why you heard them use that phrase. All right, next up. Zach Taylor writes, love this movie so much. There was too much slow motion, but I agree. Zach sometimes does use the slow motion a little bit too much. But I'll be honest with you, it never really... Somebody else mentioned that to me, and I get it. When you say it and I think back on it, yes, there probably was a little too much. But to be honest, when I was watching the movie, it never really stood out to me that much. I thought every time they used it, it was at least a good time to use it. Now, maybe I'd think differently if I watched it again, but it never did anything bad for me. Anyway, there was too much slow motion, but Warner Brothers really should have just let this movie come out in 2017, then gone on from there with the universe that they're creating now. Well, no, here's the thing. They couldn't have just released it as is. You cannot put a 4-hour movie out in theaters. It would completely tank. I mean, at the very minimum, Justice League at least broke even. You put out a Justice League that's 4 hours long. I mean, they could have put out a 3-hour version. Hell, even like 3-hour, 3-hour, 10-minute version theatrically, and they probably could have got away with that. And it probably would have been better. But there was no avenue or set of circumstances that a Warner Brothers or a Disney or a Paramount or a Sony or whoever would have let a 4-hour version of that come out. At the very, very minimum, it would have been an edited down version of it, which might have made it even better. I don't know. But I mean, yeah, that's the thing. Again, I just don't understand what the whole, there's so much dysfunction that was going on around Warner Brothers at that time. It makes it all very, very confusing. Anyway, next up, Andrew Nathan writes, John, what a great time to be a fan. The Martian Manhunter scene was nice. I thought it was kind of useless, to be honest with you. It was a fan theory from after Man of Steel, and it was cool of Zack to make it real. But yeah, that Henry Lennox's character was actually Martian Manhunter. They had hinted. I mean, actually, if you go back, because I was there, if you go back all the way to Comic-Con, however many Comic-Cons ago it was, when they had the panel and Zack Snyder brought out, I just said the actor's name and now I'm freezing it. Henry Lennox. When he brought out Henry Lennox to read the passage and they announced Batman versus Superman, there was almost a hint that there was more to Lennox's character than was letting on. And all the way from that, theory started to emerge and maybe Lennox's character, the general, was actually Martian Manhunter. And that's where that kind of all started. It goes back even further. All right, next up. Andrew Nathan writes, also, Zack confirmed that the Lake House Batman scene was supposed to be 2 lanterns that showed up. John Stewart and Hal Jordan. I could be wrong about this, but I don't think he said John Stewart and Hal Jordan. I think he mentioned a couple of lanterns, and I think other people just assumed that meant John Stewart and Hal Jordan. I don't think he said that. Again, I could be wrong. About that. Anyway, even more surprised that he was talking to Ryan Reynolds. Yeah, I do remember him saying that. Oh, that's right, because this is what I read. I read that there was going to be a scene with a Green Lantern. And the key one was not going to be Ryan Reynolds, but there was going to be a secondary lantern that would have been Ryan Reynolds. But he didn't actually say it was going to be the Hal Jordan Ryan Reynolds. But apparently that went nowhere. Like, that went absolutely nowhere. I don't think Ryan Reynolds had any desire to do anything like that, but it didn't go anywhere. But the impression I got from the interview that I read, and again, I might have misread it. I totally might have misread it. But the impression that I got is even if it was Ryan Reynolds, it wasn't going to be the Hal Jordan from Ryan Reynolds' movie. I think he just thought it would have been really cool to have Ryan Reynolds as it, considering he had played a Green Lantern before. Now, again, that was a little bit ago that I read that interview. I might not be remembering the facts right. So I won't be shocked to find out that I'm just not remembering it right. But yeah. Anyway. Next up, we've got Jared McBride who writes, I wanted a fight scene between Ben Affleck's Batman and Joe Manganiello's Deathstroke. That would have been sweet. Yes, but completely disconnected from what this movie was about. All right, there was just, I agree. Ever since we saw Deathstroke show up in the post-credit scene in Justice League, the theatrical version, I had been waiting. And then we found out, of course, that Ben was going to have Joe Manganiello's Deathstroke. I have been salivating for that confrontation. But was this the movie to put it in? No, I think Zack made a good decision not to just force that in there because cool scene, yes. It doesn't have anything to do with the narrative of the movie. Absolutely not. So it was probably the wise decision. But I am with you, Jared, that again, from that first moment, I've been salivating from that fight, but I wanted to see it in Ben Affleck's written, directed Batman movie. That's where I thought I wanted to see it, but it is what it is. All right, next up. We got Caleb Crane who writes, finally, someone gives Supes the respect he deserves. Well, I thought they did a really good job of that in, first of all, they did a great job of that in Man of Steel. I thought they did a very good job of that in Batman vs. Superman. I thought they did a very good job of that in the theatrical version of Justice League. I mean, Superman shows up. He's the Superman. He starts kicking ass. And a lot of people got mad. This is what I never understood. In the theatrical version, people got mad that Superman showed up and he just starts beating the hell out of Steppenwolf. Because he is the Superman. He is way above Steppenwolf. Right? And so he just beat the hell out of him. Well, guess what? In this one, he's even more above Steppenwolf. Like, he actually just stands there and lets Steppenwolf take his axe and hit him in the shoulder with it. And he just smiles at him and says, I'm not impressed. Like, he just, even more so, but nobody's criticizing that. Now, I didn't think they should have criticized it in the theatrical version either. I thought, of course he's beating the hell out of Steppenwolf. He's the Superman. He should be beating the hell out of Steppenwolf. But a lot of people cried about it. And then some of the same people who cried about it there aren't crying about it here. Now it's awesome that he's kicking the hell out of him even more. But whatever. I love my favorite moment of Snyder Cut. I said this in the first video. That I literally want to jump out of my chair and hoot and holler and everything was that scene, man. When Steppenwolf's sneaking up behind Victor, about to swing the giant axe at him, and Superman doesn't even block the shot. He just lets the axe hit him. I'm not impressed. And then just bashes him. Oh my God, it made my heart smile so hard. It made my heart smile so hard. It's the best scene of the movie. To me, as a Superman fan, it was absolutely the best scene of the movie. All right, next up. Jack Master Nord writes, I wanted more Snyder in the DCU. Barry had the best one-liners. Barry had great, both in the original theatrical cut and in this one. I thought he had the best one-liners. In almost any movie that I've seen, hashtag give more Snyder. And yeah, nothing to be said about that. Jack also writes, by the way, Nord is pronounced no red. Oh, no red. No red. All right. Thank you for correcting me. I've just been saying Nord. Thank you for the update on that. All right, next up. Brandon Caterpillar writes, I love the Darkseid battle and wish we could get more of that. Lanterns, old gods, Zeus and Ares, Amazonians, Atlanteans, and humans uniting in battle. Yeah, they extended it out for this one. I am not going to lie to you, Brandon. I agree with you. I could have taken a little bit more of that. I mean, take out the singing songstresses of the sea. Take that out and give us like 30 more seconds of that fight. Although that fight was pretty expensive to make. Okay, so I get it. They already gave it to us longer, but I'm in agreement with you. I really, really did. I like that scene a lot, and I was glad that we got a little bit more of it this time around, and with a little bit more context as well. I thought that was really good. All right, next up, we've got Just Don't Cry Living 16 writes, Fly, my son, with the Man of Steel theme made me nearly shed a tear. Again, hearing that theme, I didn't think we had to do the whole rocks thing again. I've already said that, but the dialogue of the two fathers, that theme music, it's so powerful. It's just a great, great moment. Dustin Lewis writes, with Snyder being able to complete his film, I wonder if this could open the doors for Ben Affleck's Batman film to be green lit as well as Man of Steel 2. Nope, doesn't look like it. I mean, you guys know me, Man of Steel. I would love a Man of Steel sequel. I have been living to get that Ben Affleck Batman movie, but I also think we're going to be all disappointed. I don't think that's coming. But I mean, what a world it would be if we did. Nothing I would love more. All right, Andrew Nathan writes, John, it looks like Lois is carrying a bassinet at the end of in the Kent farm. See, there was a discussion that broke out the other day that when Bruce says to Clark, congratulations, by the way, I thought, and I still do, that he was referencing him getting engaged to Lois because, of course, on the scene on the Kent farm, Clark is just standing out in the wheat field and Lois comes walking behind him and he says, I take that as a yes. And she's like, what? You're wearing the ring. So I'm guessing that, so my thought is, and it still is, that the congratulations was about you're getting married. But because of that one scene where you see a pregnancy test in her drawer, and maybe she's carrying a bassinet. I honestly, I did not notice a bassinet. I'll have to go back and look at it again, because you might be right. There are some people who think that he was saying congratulations for a pregnancy. Either are great. So right now, I still think it was wedding, because he specifically mentions, I take that as a yes, because she's wearing the ring, but maybe it was about a baby being involved, which would also tie in thematically to the Injustice Gods Among Us stuff. Just throwing that out there. All right, thanks for that, Andrew. Next up, Nicholas Clark writes, instead of Barry laying on top of Wonder Woman, which I thought was a really funny scene, we get Barry caressing a stranger's cheek. He needs help, LOL. Are you going to watch the Batman vs. Superman 4K edition? No, not because I don't like it. I own Batman vs. Superman. I own both versions. I own the regular version of Batman vs. Superman. I own the Batman vs. Superman Ultimate Edition. I own them both. I have 4K TVs. I don't care about 4K. If you have a good player and a good TV, not to mention my TV is big enough and my living room's big enough that I sit far enough away from my TV, the human eye wouldn't be able to notice a difference anyway. You can go find it on YouTube. There are charts out there about screen size to distance ratios, about when the human eye can detect a difference between like really, really good, like HD versus 4K. And the closer you are, the more you can tell. I really wouldn't be able to see a difference anyway, because of the ratio of like TV size to how far from the TV I sit. So I don't think I'd be able to notice it anyway. So no, I'm not planning on watching the Batman vs. Superman 4K, but that has nothing to do with Batman vs. Superman, because I already own the other two versions. It's just that I don't really care all that much about 4K stuff, but that's just me. All right, next up, Andrew Nathan writes, the woman Flash saves is Kersey Clemens, who is Iris West. Yes, we know all that. And is cast in the Flash multiverse. Yeah, get that. But again, that doesn't mean it's a scene that should have been in this movie. It added nothing. It had no constructive purpose in this movie. If you really wanted that scene, it should have been a movie in a Flash movie. If you needed to have it, it needed to be there. It just served no purpose in this one whatsoever. Like, we didn't need to see Iris West in this movie. There was no point. There was no purpose. And so I'm very, very glad in the theatrical version that was one of the scenes to get cut. And it should have been cut from this version too. It just should have been cut. All right, next up, Nicholas Rios writes, what about a 4-hour-long Joss Whedon Justice League? Will you see it? Do you think the black suit of Superman was necessary for the movie? No, it was a cool moment, but I don't think it was necessary for the movie. But it's not like it took up more time, so it's not like there was anything bad about him wearing the black suit. There was no drawback. Let's be clear about that. Just because I'm saying it wasn't necessary, there was also no drawback to him wearing the black suit. But again, going back to the Joss Whedon, you realize after seeing the Snyder Cut that there is really no Joss Whedon version. That's Zack Snyder's movie. He just, because he was directed by Warner Brothers, he had to cut it completely in half and then put in a few other things that may or may not work. But ultimately, it was never his movie. And so I know a lot of people were like, the Snyder one is going to be 95% different. That was obviously not true, because the majority of what was in the theatrical version is in the Snyder Cut. But there never really was, like, Joss Whedon never actually had his own version of the movie. He never really did. Now, whether it would have been better or worse, who knows? We'll never know. But that's the thing that really I was expecting more of a difference. I was expecting that Warner Brothers and Joss Whedon's version would have had more difference from the original Zack Snyder one. But now that we've seen the original Zack Snyder one, we realize, what was the point? You didn't do anything. The story was exactly the same. All you did was cut the damn thing in half, taking away all the character development, and you modified a couple of things to explain the half of the movie, and you put in that one little family. Again, I understood the philosophy behind it, to give a face of humanity, to remind us of what it was the Justice League was fighting for. I get it. It just didn't work. But let's put it this way. I would be interested to see what would the guy who made the Avengers, I would be interested to see his real take on Justice League. his actual take on Justice League. I would be interested in that. I'm not saying it would be better than Zack's. I'm just saying it would be interesting to see what would his actually look like, because that thing Warner Brothers made him put together was not his movie in any stretch of the imagination. It was still the original movie Zack shot, and they didn't do anything to change the story at all. And which makes me wonder again, what the hell was the point of doing that theatrical version? I just don't get it. Anyway, Breezingans writes, I'm glad Leto got some time to shine again. Me too, because I really do like his Joker. I do. But Jesus, get that guy an inhaler. Sounds like he's having an asthma attack with those line deliveries. I don't know. I like his Joker iteration. I like the way he talks as the Joker. I kind of dig it. And I dug it in this one as well. So, but again, I was a pre-existing fan of this iteration of Joker, so I was just really happy to see him back. That got me really excited. So anyway, there's that. Next up, Migs XL writes, what do you think may be the reason why Bruce is responsible for Lois's death? No idea. The only thing I can imagine is, if you go back to The Dark Knight, is that there may have been a situation where Bruce maybe had to make a choice. Save those 5 kids or save Lois. Save that bus of orphans or save Lois. Or whatever. Just like in Dark Knight, when he had to make a choice. Do I save Harvey or do I save Maggie Gyllenhaal? And he made the choice to save Harvey. So that's the only thing I get. Otherwise, no idea. But that's the only thing I can think of, Migs. That's the only thing I can think of. All right, Javi Q writes, Can we talk about how badass Ares and Zeus were? Yeah, that was pretty damn good. Also, R.I.P. to the one and only Green Lantern guy. I'm also kind of mad Granny Goodness didn't say a single word. But I mean, I get that. I know a lot of people were very excited when they saw images and they saw Granny Goodness was going to be there. But let me defend the choice. What purpose would it have served? Why did we need Granny Goodness to say anything? Why did Zack Snyder, what was it about Zack Snyder's story that really needed Granny Goodness to step up and have lines of dialogue that would have improved his movie or his story? I don't think there was any. There was no need to hear her speak. There was no need for her to talk in the movie. And so instead of just throwing in more things, Snyder made the decision that we don't need to hear her talk right now because it's not relevant to the story. And he made that choice. And I think it was the right choice. But somebody else was writing in the other day, Javi, that, in that scene when he axes down in Darkseid's chest, all you can hear is Thanos' voice. You should have gone for the head, right? That's because if he had gotten him in the head, that would have ended it. Just like if Thor had gotten him in the head, it would have ended it. So that was kind of funny. But no, listen, I completely support Snyder's decision there. I think it was the right. I mean, everybody's very excited about Granny Goodness, but you got to serve the story first. And I think that's what Snyder did there. So that's just me. All right, next up. Christopher Lira writes, Hey, John, doesn't Warner Brothers release this version? Why? You probably mean why don't? Why doesn't Warner Brothers release this version of the film in theaters? With theaters opening back up, why not make some of the money that they lost with the theatrical version? Just saying, I would love to see this in a theater to watch. Well, there's 2 things to keep in mind. Number 1, the theatrical version did not lose money. Didn't make much, barely broke even, but it didn't lose money. So there's that. Number 2. Mounting a marketing campaign is an expensive endeavor. You're talking about $10 to $20 million. For something like this, you want to mount a marketing campaign, all that kind of stuff. Probably not going to do any good. The other thing, of course, is 4-hour runtime. You're immediately disenfranchising a lot of the potential audience. And I would say this, still being in the pandemic as we are, if they spent the money they would need to spend to mount a true good marketing campaign to letting people know this is going to be hitting theaters, I don't know that they can make back the money. Just on that. Not to mention, and this is the most important thing, the reason HBO Max got this thing was to draw attention to HBO Max. The purpose they ever greenlit putting up the money so Zack could actually make his Zack Snyder cut was to benefit HBO Max. Was that if you want to see this, you got to sign up to HBO Max to see it. For them to take it and put it into movie theaters becomes counterproductive. That works against what their entire purpose was. They don't want people to go, oh, I don't have to get HBO Max. I can just go watch it in this one 25% capacity theater. That's not what HBO Max wants. HBO Max wants people to sign up for HBO Max. That is the key thing about in the streaming wars. It's going to become about exclusive premium content. And HBO Max, Warner Media didn't put up $70 million so they could make this thing to draw attention away from HBO Max. They want people focused on HBO Max. And if I'm not mistaken, and listen, there are places in the world where there are other options with it, and I believe there are places you can see it theatrically. But I don't see Warner Brothers mounting a marketing campaign, putting up the money for advertising, and making a big deal out of it, when really what HBO Max wants is attention on HBO Max. So I think that's the key thing there. Plus, there are others. You're going to have a very, very hard time, other than already getting the hardcore fans of it, to go out to a theater to see a 4-hour version. I just think you're going to have a hard time with that. But again, it's all about getting people to HBO Max. All right, next up. Jesus Vega writes, I did it. I finally bought my first Hot Toys. Well, technically my first two. I pre-ordered the Snyder Cut 2-pack with Black Suit Superman and Nightmare Batman. Love the movie and love the show. Oh, you know what? I bet you anything that probably Robert Meyer Burnett's probably done that already too. And I wouldn't mind having that, because you know how much I love Henry Cavill's Superman. I love Ben Affleck's Batman. They are my two favorites. Henry Cavill is my favorite Superman. Ben Affleck is my favorite Batman. So I would love to have one too. It's a little too expensive for me to spend on. I can't really get it, but I'm sure you and Robert Meyer Burnett will both be enjoying those whenever they actually get delivered to your home. So good purchase, man. Good purchase. All right. Sinfinity and Beyond writes, Soups was holding Lois's dead body in the Batcave when Darkseid put his hand on his shoulder. I didn't notice that. Her death is the key to Soups succumbing to anti-life. Oh, well, no, they've been very, very clear about that. That whatever it is that has turned Superman to whatever it is he becomes is clearly all predicated on the death of Lois Lane. And again, like one of the other viewers wrote in earlier, that all harkens back to Injustice: Gods Among Us, which is also the ignition point of what turns that Superman. Losing the thing you love most in the world can do, it's like Joker always said, all it takes is one bad day, man. All it takes is one bad day. All right, Michael Joyce writes, hey, John, I really enjoyed the Snyder Cut. My only flaw is it's too long and too slow paced, even though the slow pace really helped the movie breathe. Well, no, giving you more time doesn't mean you have to have slow pace, right? You could give a lot more time to the movie. You can give another hour and a half to the movie to give more room to breathe, but you can still maintain a good pace, right? And so I agree with you. I think the one big flaw of the Snyder Cut is it's got too much bloat. I thought they easily could have taken a scalpel and taken a half hour out of it, and you still would have enjoyed all the benefits of the extra time. You still would have had all that great new character depth, great new character development, great expanded context on the narrative. You would have still had all of that great stuff that the extended time got you, except we would have had much better, much crisper pace, and it just would have made the movie sing along even better than it already does. And it does move along pretty good, but there's a lot of bloat that could have been cut out. So I agree. Every movie's got its flaw. I think this one's flaw is it needed at least a half hour cut out of it. That's just me. All right, next up. Nicholas Clark writes, after seeing this film, I would give anything to see a live action Batman, a Death in the Family, Ben Affleck movie. It's my favorite Batman story arc. Well, except you would end up being disappointed because as we've seen, neither Marvel nor DC completely, they actually follow any of the comic book storylines. They take themes from the storylines, but they don't actually follow them. And I would suggest that if you're really a big fan of that particular story arc, you'd probably just end up being mad that they don't actually completely follow the story arc. But maybe, listen, All I know is that all I've wanted for years is Ben Affleck to write, direct, and star in a Batman movie. That's what I want. Give me that. Give me that. I know we're not getting it, but that's all I want. But there will be a day of great celebration, my friends, great joy, at least in the Campea household, if we ever find out that we are getting that Batman, whether it's a death in the family or anything else. I will be very, very happy. All right, next up. Nomad Icamedius? Diasa? I'm not sure. Writes, one of two. Even though the epilogue scene is not needed, I'm glad we saw an Affleck and Leto scene. If this is truly the last time we will see either of them, Black Suit could be explained like this. When Superman comes back, he looks at the Sikh Hope Memorial on his grave, which is silver and black. Maybe. And I'm like you. I go back and forth on that final epilogue. So the first time I'm watching, I'm like, it didn't need to be there. And it doesn't. It doesn't need to be there. But I'd be lying if I didn't tell you I really enjoyed it. And especially getting to see some interaction between this Leto Joker that I do quite like and my favorite Batman of all time, Ben Affleck. That's pretty cool. And seeing, Batman leading this new ragtag, it's really cool because it makes you wonder what the hell happened that has led Deathstroke to working with Batman. What has brought about Mara now being a part of this crew? And how the hell did Joker become a part of it? It allows the imagination to run wild. So like I said, I go back and forth. It wasn't needed, but man, it does let your imagination play a little bit. So I go back and forth on that. All right, next up. Derek Thomas Pierce Phillips writes, the black suit should have been explained in that it soaks in sun's radiation, therefore making Superman stronger and rejuvenating his powers faster. Again, I've heard many, many people say that, but then, okay, so why doesn't he always wear the black suit? If there's literally a suit in his closet that makes him more powerful, why would he not be wearing that suit all the time? Why does that one help him absorb sun's rays more than what? I don't know. Again, so I get it, Derek. You're not alone. I've heard a lot of people say it. Then to me, it just raises the obvious question. Well, then why isn't that the one he always wears? Anyway, that's just me. All right, next one and final one of the day comes to us from Patrick Foley, who writes, my question is, will this movie's performance allow the Snyderverse to continue, or is it doomed? It's doomed. This was my first Snyderverse film, and I loved it. Again, all I can go by, because nobody out there has any insider information. All any of us can go by is what has Zack Snyder and Warner Brothers all said. Zack Snyder has said clearly, I have no plans to do any more. Warner Brothers has said clearly, this is a cul-de-sac. This is a one-time thing. Now, if they, and I know I've said this about 3 or 4 times, but it has to be repeated. If they ever change their tune, well, then we can start to imagine a little bit, well, maybe they do something else moving forward. But it seems like Warner Brothers and Walter Hamada are completely moving in a different direction now, a direction that they're having some success with. And it has to be said, they're having more success now than when they were doing Zack Snyder's movies. They're winning Academy Awards and hitting billion-dollar films. They never did that with Snyder's movies. But again, as long as Warner Brothers is saying this is a one-time thing and Snyder is saying that I have no plans to do anymore, there's really no point in us speculating about it. It seems like it's a dead issue. And if they ever change what they're saying, then we can revisit. So that's kind of my take on that. All right, guys, that'll do it for our open spoiler discussion about Batman versus Superman, about Zack Snyder's Justice League. Again, summing up, I think this was a definite improvement. The added runtime allowed them to do a number of things that really expanded, gave more depth, all that kind of stuff. I thought it was better than theatrical, better than Batman versus Superman, better than Aquaman. Not as good as, I don't think it's as good as Man of Steel. I don't think it's as good as the first Wonder Woman movie. I don't think it's as good as Shazam. But it's definitely better than a lot of the other ones as well. I thought this was a win. I thought the only problem with it was it could have been shaved down a good half hour or so. Other than that, I thought it was really enjoyable. Anyway, guys, thank you for participating in this and sending in your thoughts, opinions, and perspectives on the Snyder Cut of Justice League. That will do it for me for now, guys. Thanks a lot for being here. My name's John Campea, and until next time, my friends, bye-bye.